Hey guys, Jameson DIY here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing an underhood look at the 2014 to 2019 and most likely newer Silverados. They don't change things very often, and when they do, they're minor. So this is going to cover a lot of years. At bare minimum, for sure, 2014 to 2019 Silverados, whether it be the 5.3, the 6.2. Even the 4.3s are very similar. This is going to be just an overview of what to look for under your hood. My kind of point to this video is basically just to familiarize you with the different parts under the hood, whether it be because your mechanic told you need something and you don't know what it is or where it's at, or whether or not he replaced it after he was done, or maybe you're a DIY guy and you just don't know where something's at. Hopefully this will help you at least kind of get to know what's under your hood. So let's start over here on the driver's side. Okay, on the driver's side here, we're looking at immediately the brake fluid. This is where your brake fluid goes. This is the reservoir for the brake fluid. This is the master cylinder. There's a level switch here, so if the level drops down to a certain amount, the switch will turn the red brake light on the dash. Keep an eye on your brake fluid level. There's no reason typically to add brake fluid to this. If the brake fluid is low, you have your max here and your min here. If the brake fluid's low, it indicates that something else is happening. Either there's a leak, or more likely the brake pads are getting worn. So as the brake pads wear out, fluid level will drop and get closer here. So if you see the red brake light on, you come here, you check your brake fluid, and it's down here by the minimum, then it's a good idea to have your brake pads checked out and obviously make sure there's no leaks. Okay, here to the right side of the brake master cylinder, we've got the fuse box. The fuse box does have a lid here that you can pop up. So if you pop these two tabs out, the lid will lift up. You have your fuses and relays under there. You can pop that back down. It also has handles on either side. If you lift these handles up, it will release the whole fuse box, which is good because it's a Chevy and it will likely need replacement at some point, especially if you live in a salty, rusty area. Here in the South, we don't have to worry about replacing fuse boxes that often, but it is something to think about if you do live in a rusty, salty area and a mechanic tells you that you need a new fuse box. Well, this is where it's at. This is how it's replaced. Pop these up. On the bottom side, there's going to be a lot of connectors. The connectors will all come out, and then the whole box will slide back in. Put the handles here back in place, lock it down, and boom, that's done. Okay, looking more towards the center of the engine bay. Obviously, this is the engine in its entirety. Pointing out components here, I've got a PCV hose here. This is going to be a little bit different on completely stock trucks because this system is aftermarket for the air filter. So all this is going to be a little bit different if you have a stock truck, but it's going to be similar to this. You're still going to have these PCV hoses. So the PCV hoses will run down here to the valve cover, which is this whole piece right here. This is actually a plastic cover. Valve covers underneath that. So this would be the valve cover. This would be the valve cover underneath it. You're going to add your oil right here where it says Dexos 020. That's what's required on these trucks, is a synthetic blend or full synthetic 0W20. Along here we have connectors for all the ignition coils. So the ignition coils live right underneath this plastic cover. Once you pop this off, which is just held in with little clip type things, so you can actually pull this whole plastic piece off. You'll have to take the oil cap off like that, and then you can pop this whole plastic cover off. That will expose your ignition coils. So over here, this is what would be the intake manifold. This is of course also a cover because they have to cover everything up to make it look nice and pretty. But underneath this plastic cover is the intake manifold, and with a few bolts being removed, this whole cover will come up and the intake manifold will be right under there. If you have a problem such as a lean code or a lean condition and the mechanic tells you that the intake gaskets have to be replaced, what he's talking about is this whole piece right here will need to come off, and then the gaskets that connect to the cylinder heads, which are down there, those gaskets will be replaced once the intake is removed. Alright, still here on the driver's side. We've got a few things to point out. For maintenance wise, we've got our spark plug wires here. So you'll obviously have one for every cylinder, so there'll be 4 on each side. 1, 2, 3, and 4. This end will connect to the ignition coils under this cover, and then obviously the bottom end will connect to the spark plugs. So down here at the end of that will be your spark plugs. Right next to that we have the steering shaft. So this will be your steering shaft right here. This hose right here is a vacuum hose. It runs up to the brake booster, which is here behind the master cylinder. So this is what gives you the power assist for your brakes. Now in the 2014 and newer Chevy trucks, rather than using engine vacuum, where this hose would run to the engine and use vacuum created by the engine to assist in your power braking, on this truck what they did was they added a vacuum pump, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but this is the hose that runs from the vacuum pump to the power brake booster. So this is where the brake booster gets its vacuum for the power assisted brakes. Okay, so we're at our air filtration system. Like I said before, this is all aftermarket. On the factory setup, what's going to happen is that out here of the throttle body, which is this unit right here, out of that's going to be a short section kind of like this, and then there's going to be a big square box. So all this square box right here, all that is baffling, which decreases the noise that it makes when the engine is sucking air through here. So all that is just for creature comforts, just to make this whole system quieter. So when you upgrade or change out the factory filtration system to something like this, cold air intake, you're going to lose all that baffling, so it is going to be louder when you step on the gas, because there's nothing to dampen the sound here on this system. Either way, it all works the same. You have your PCV hoses, one to each valve cover, which I already showed you that, and then it'll come out here to the air filter, which is over here. Whether you have an aftermarket or factory system, you're going to have a mass airflow sensor, which lives right here on this setup. It's right there. This is the connector. It will be very close to that if you have OEM factory airbox. It's going to be right here. So, and then your airbox on a factory will still be right here. It'll just be enclosed with a lid. And then you can pull the lid and your air filter will live right there. Okay, moving over to the passenger side of the truck. I've got a few things of interest here. You've got your coolant expansion tank, where your coolant / antifreeze will live. This is the cap for that. Over here we have the battery. So on gasoline engines, it's going to have just the one battery right here. If it's a diesel, obviously all of this is going to be different, but your second battery will live over there on the driver's side of the truck. But here in the gasoline engine, we just got the one battery here. We've got the other PCV hose here from the other side of the air box, air tube, down to the valve cover. Same on this side. You've got your valve cover, you've got the valve cover underneath it, your ignition coil wires, and if we look back here at the very end here, where these the hose and the line here, you got that metal line right there, and you have the rubber hose with the crimp, and it goes up there to the back end of the engine bay, what the firewall's at. That's going to be your expansion valve for your AC. These are AC lines here, those two right there. This is going to be a service port for your AC system. So this is the high side port for hooking up AC gauges, and if we look under these coolant hoses right here, this is the AC line here. This is the low side port, so if we take that cap off, You can hook your low side gauge up to that if you're DIYer and you're adding Freon. Typically, this is where you're going to be adding Freon to. Okay, let's talk about fluids. We touched on it a little bit, but let's go over it really quickly. So this is your antifreeze and coolant. If you want to add there's the cap. Here's the line here, which is the cold mark. So when the engine's cold, it should be right here. If it's low, you can add some. If it is extremely low, then you might want to take a look and see if you have leaks, because you don't obviously want that to be gone. The engine could overheat and cause problems. If you look slightly over here to the right, this is where you check and fill your transmission fluid. So you'll pop this lock up, slide that's your dipstick. If we look over here, we already showed you the engine oil cap, so this is where you're going to add oil, and that yellow handle there, that's where you're going to check the oil. So you want to pull it out and wipe the stick, reinsert it, pull it back out, and check your engine oil level, and that is with the engine off. On the transmission, it's going to be different. You're going to check that when it's running and the engine is warm. Otherwise, the level will not indicate correctly if the engine's cold or it's off. So check that when it's hot and running. Check this when it is not running. We looked at the brake fluid here, and that is where you're going to add brake fluid or check your level. Typically you do not add brake fluid because there could be a problem, so you want to check the brake system to make sure that something is not happening. Otherwise your brake fluid level should be in the safe range, which is in between the min and the max. Lastly but not leastly, we have our washer fluid here. Open cap, insert fluid, close cap. Okay, now we're going to look at some more advanced components here on the engine, just so you can know what you're looking at. For whatever reason you need to look at it. So we're going to go over these pretty quickly. Right here by the throttle body, this is the throttle body. We have a map sensor located right here. On this side we have the throttle position sensor, which is attached directly to the throttle body, and in a lot of cases the throttle body and the throttle position sensor are sold as one unit. Even though they can be replaced individually, a lot of times it's recommended, if need to be replaced, they're replaced as a unit. That will be something that will be up to you or your mechanic whether or not you want to do that. If we look down here a little bit, we have the alternator, the PCV hoses we talked about. If we're looking over here, we have some coolant lines. They will run to the radiator, which is underneath this big plastic cover. While we're looking here, we can look here. This is our refrigerant identification label, 2014 up to about 2017. It's going to be the R134. I think after that they switched to the newer 1234YF refrigerant. On this one though, it is still the R134. If we take a look back here, these two hoses right here are going to be your heater hoses. So right back there on the firewall where they connect, well, on the other side of that, inside of your dash, is going to be the heater core. So the heater core is back there behind the dash inside of the car. These are your heater hoses, and they'll run down here to the water pump, which we'll show you here in a second. Looking down here, we have your upper radiator hose. It's a large one right here. It goes down to the thermostat, which lives under this plastic cover. Next to that, we have a temperature sensor for the engine. So this will measure the temperature of your coolant, essentially the temperature of your engine. This will tell you if the truck is overheating or not. Looking further down below the upper radiator hose here, we have the lower radiator hose. Next to the lower radiator hose, we have the water pump. The water pump on this is significantly different than the old water pumps previous to 2014. So in 2014 they were more down here, or I'm sorry, previously to 2014 they were more down here, a lot smaller. On this one it's kind of a whole large coolant housing. Right here we have the serpentine belt tensioner. So to remove the belt, you would stick a 1/2 inch drive ratchet or some sort of serpentine tool right there. You would rotate the tensioner, and then you would be able to remove the serpentine belt, which is this right here. Okay, further down into the abyss of darkness in the front of the engine where the belt lives, let's go over a few things here. I'm going to shine my light. I know it's going to be hard to see, but I'm going to shine my light on the things of note. So right here where my light's at, that is the crankshaft pulley. So that is the main pulley that drives all the belts and bolts into the crankshaft. Over here to the left of it, that is your AC compressor. If we look down here below the water pump, which is what I already showed you, down there we have another pulley which is also new to 2014 and up models. So that's going to be the air pump that we talked about before. So it's pretty much sole purpose on this truck is to provide the vacuum to run the power brakes. That's pretty much it. It's just a vacuum pump, air pump, however you want to call it, that will supply the vacuum in order to assist the power brakes. So rather than using engine vacuum, it's going to use this pump, which is driven by a belt, and that will supply vacuum to the power brake booster, which we talked about lives right there. So the last thing we're going to go over is the belts. This truck, this is a new setup here for the belts with the water pump change, the addition of the vacuum pump. This has changed significantly from the 2013 and older Chevy trucks. So this actually has 3 belts versus 2 belts on the older trucks. So we have the main serpentine belt, which is that one right there. We have the AC belt, which lives down there. And that's going to be a stretch belt, which typically when removed needs to be cut. You can remove them without cutting them, although it's pretty difficult. Normally if you're taking it off, you're replacing it, and they may require special tools if they work. So that's something to think about if you need to replace the AC belt. In addition to the AC belt, we have also the vacuum pump belt, which you can't even see on this truck. You can see the vacuum pump pulley, which is right there, and it has its own separate belt, which is behind the AC belt, which is also a stretch belt. So there's no tensioner. Like we talked about before, the serpentine belt has the tensioner right there, so it can be removed by putting a tool inside the square hole and rotating it over, and the belt can be removed. On the AC and the vacuum pump, they are stretch belts, meaning there is no tensioner. They stretch to fit, and they are a pain and may require a special tool to do. Either way, those are your 3 belts on the 2014 and newer Silverado. There's the overview of the engine compartment. And I'm going to wrap it up, guys. That is the overview of the 2014 and newer Silverado trucks, 4.3, 5.3, 6.2 liters, pretty much all the gasoline engines. This is what you can expect to see. I hope this hopefully helps you identify some of the components if you're questioning what is under your hood and where are things located. This is what it is. Thanks for watching.